The State Department apparently struck a deal with Hillary Clinton and her aide, Huma Abedin, that allowed them to remove files, hard copies of files and records they claimed were personal, and keep them from the public eye. This does not happen in federal agencies. Typically, Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry has been on it, and he has details. Hey, Ed.
Tucker, good to see you. These explosive documents out today suggest, well, Hillary Clinton certainly got a lot of scrutiny about her email server. She also had people buried deep inside the federal government, including at the State Department, who helped try to keep her out of trouble. As you noted, this is a result of a lawsuit by the conservative group Judicial Watch. And what they found is that the State Department allowed Clinton and top aides like Huma Abedin to go in and remove electronic and hard copy records from her official time as Secretary of State before she left office. The claim is that they were unclassified records and they were, quote unquote, personal materials. In fairness, some of the records were deemed to be personal correspondence, but other records that were removed, we're told, were very official sounding records like her schedules, her call logs, who she spoke to over the phone. We're told Abedin, for example, was allowed to take 5 boxes of physical materials out of the State Department headquarters here in Washington, including a set of records titled Muslim engagement documents. Also interesting is that these records included so-called gift binders. What Judicial Watch believes that to be is lists of gifts that the Clinton Foundation received from various donors around the world. That could obviously shed some light, not just on the gifts that were received, but potential official actions taken by the Clinton State Department. Here's the key question tonight that we do not know, is whether or not there were copies made by the State Department of these electronic and physical records. Because even if they took them out, obviously, there could be a record buried somewhere in the State Department that will eventually come out, Tucker.
Ed Henry, thank you for that.
Thank you.
We're going to discuss what Ed just told us in just a minute with our guest. But first, we want to ask him about the changes to the Comey memo. Alan Dershowitz is, of course, a retired Harvard law professor, one of the country's great experts on the Constitution, and he joins us tonight. So, Professor, about the Comey memo, which was apparently was written 2 months before he read it and 2 months before the FBI completed its interviews of key figures in the investigation, including Hillary Clinton and Cheryl Mills. How could you write a memo exonerating someone before the investigation had concluded?
Well, first, let's look at the big picture. Does anybody want to live under a judicial system where one's freedom depends on whether the conduct was grossly negligent or extremely careless? Those are the vaguest possible terms. If you asked 100 potential jurors, which is worse, being grossly negligent or extremely careless, they'd probably split 50-50.
No, that's a great point.
So these rules are absurd, the way we criminalize conduct using terms like that endanger everyone's civil liberties. Also, let's look at the other big picture. Comey's decision to make the statement, calling her extremely careless, may very well have contributed to her losing the election. Comey was not her friend. Comey was perceived to be somebody who was trying to strike an appropriate balance. And what I think happened here is ultimately Comey, not anybody else, made the decision on balance that she should not be prosecuted. And that's why the words were changed, because if he had said that she was grossly negligent, people would say, oh, my God, that's a crime. But he had already made the decision based on the fact that nobody had ever been prosecuted who was in a position of authority like Hillary Clinton for conduct in any way similar to this, and that was in his statement. So I do think that it was the right decision not to prosecute her criminally, and I think the change of the language was designed to simply support that decision. Now, look, no decision should ever be made until an investigation is complete.
Well, obviously, but why shouldn't we know exactly what happened?
With a predisposition.
So, but I mean, you're the constitutional scholar, but Congress has oversight, committees have oversight of the federal agencies, including the FBI, and they've asked a really simple question, which was, who made these changes? Why, they can't get an answer. So isn't that unconstitutional? How can the FBI deny them that answer?
They shouldn't be able to. Our system of checks and balances permits Congress to subpoena and learn what the FBI has done. The FBI is a creature of Congress. It's part of the executive department, to be sure. We have separation of powers. But checks and balances permits Congress to check on the executive branch. So I think transparency and constitutionality require that the FBI disclose that important piece of information.
Interesting. What do you make of the deal that the State Department struck with Hillary Clinton and her top aide, Huma Abedin, that allowed them to take files out of the building and prevented those files from being seen under FOIA, Freedom of Information Act? I've never heard of anything like that. Have you?
Well, I think routinely people who serve as Secretary of State and other positions are going to write books, and they routinely take material home that are deemed to be personal. Usually copies are maintained at the government agency, and
Yes.
I would bet that copies, electronic copies, exist of what Hillary Clinton removed. It's worth asking about, but I wouldn't jump to any conclusions. And again, I don't want to see criminalization become the first resort. If we don't like what somebody did, lock her up, lock him up. We're seeing that today against
I agree with you. I agree with you
yeah.
vehemently on that, and I part with some
Good.
Republicans in that. I don't think that everything you dislike ought to be punished with the rule of law, but I think that one of the reasons everyone is so spun up and feels so threatened is because a lot of this is opaque. A lot of this is hidden from public view. Lack of transparency makes people agitated. And so on what grounds could you hide your public schedule from public view?
You should never be able to do that. It was Louis Brandeis who said that sunshine is the best disinfectant. And our government should be disclosing everything. Everything is subject to disclosure. Unless there is an overwhelming national security reason for keeping it temporarily sealed. Nothing should ever be permanently sealed. And I think transparency trumps privacy when you're a government official.
That's right. You don't have to work there. Professor Dershowitz, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.